Kia ora team, Noah Willoff here, host of the Beyond the Surface podcast. Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. Before you get into this juicy conversation, please make sure you go check out our official sponsor of the podcast, Moana Road. They really have something for everyone. They've got sunglasses, a whole range of awesome products. So check out their website and the link in the description below and support Moana Road because it also supports the podcast and helps us get more of the guests on that you love. Hope you enjoy this episode. Cheers. Malindi, welcome to the podcast.
Kia ora Noah.
Thanks so much for jumping on. I know we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and just really keen to unpack your journey because I feel like you've done so much in your short life, from professional sport, climbing up the corporate ladder, and now taking a more path to a more purposeful approach, being the CEO of Outward Bound, and as a massive Outward Bound advocate, keen to also get into that. So. Yeah, take me back to 16-year-old Malindi. What were you like as a 16-year-old?
Sounds good. And unpacking my journey and starting at 16-year-old Malindi would probably be more like a therapy session than a podcast. But at 16 was a really interesting and pivotal point for me. I actually started racing bikes and road bikes, bicycles. Mm-hmm. When I say that, people often think I mean motorbikes and motocross, and it's like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, no, like a push bike. And I ended up getting selected not long after I started to go and race overseas, and had this amazing opportunity, which no 16-year-old would say no to go to Switzerland and race there for a while, and sort of through Europe, and then sort of jumped into the professional cycling scene and ended up doing that for a good few years while I scrambled my way through my last few years of school. So,
wow, that's massive.
Yeah, it was massive. And for a 16-year-old, when I think about the 16-year-olds we work with today and 16-year-olds that I meet, I just think it's like, how on earth did I know that was what I wanted to do or should have done? And it was really formative when I look back now, but it was also impulsive.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super interesting. And what brought you towards cycling?
I actually couldn't tell you definitively. I was really into sport, and it had a very cool culture at that time. I think I had got an injury from running. I was really into running, and it was sort of like do some swimming or do some cycling to rehabilitate. And as you can see, I've got really curly hair, so swimming isn't a great option for a 16-year-old, 16-year-old girl who cares about her hair. And so cycling it was. And I loved it. I sort of think of a bicycle as the perfect machine, the transfer of energy to movement. I don't think we've got a better creation yet, although that might be around the corner with AI. But a bike is something that's pretty amazing, socially, recreationally, for transport. And then as a sport, it's I don't know if you've ever watched bike racing, but it's incredibly strategic and grueling. So I got hooked.
That's awesome. I just love the Lycra. Hey,
yeah,
I love dressing up in Lycra, looking the part.
Yeah, when you're 16, dressing up in Lycra is not as cool. But
does it ever become cool?
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe when you're a middle-aged man.
Yeah, maybe. And taking that into a professional capacity, was there a pretty clear pathway to actually earn some money as a professional cycling athlete?
Not really in those days. It was a pretty long time ago, and I think if you stuck at it and it was what you wanted to devote your whole life to, you would you could carve a career out of it, and people do, and people did. So I don't want to say no, but people did. But it was a lot more challenging for women in particular. Just huge disparities between the women and the men, and I also didn't have it in me to do that. It was sort of something that I said yes to, and was pretty good at. I was pretty good at it physically and mentally when it came to racing, but I don't think I ever took it seriously enough. I couldn't get past the fact that it was just a game that we'd made up, and so I didn't have what it took to devote my whole life to it forever. Yeah.
Are you in part a bit of an overthinker? Were you overthinking cycling too much?
I think we're going way too deep, too fast, Noah. But I did this thing sometimes when we were racing, and everyone would be so focused and so serious. And I'd like zoom, and you'd be like riding your bike around in little circles, and people were like warming up, and they'd have their like team, and no one's making eye contact. And I'd have this thing where like I'd zoom out and imagine I was an alien, like coming down to observe humans, like trying to work out what the hell we were up to. Like, what are they doing? They're riding around in circles and they're not talking to each other. And it just all seemed really weird. And so I think that not being able to get out of my head and like really drop into taking it as seriously as you need to go all the way was part of why I was, it was a short-term, very formative, amazing experience, but not something that I did till I was 35, 40.
Yeah, right. That's so funny. Just the zooming out of an alien and what would they be thinking? I think that all the time with humanity in general.
Too. Still happens.
Yeah, they're probably watching us and being like, what the hell are these guys doing?
Why are they sitting in that little room with the microphones?
Yeah.
What are they doing?
Beyond the surface? What?
Yeah.
So like when it went to your cycling career, what was the sort of next steps for you following that? Because obviously then you went down the route of the corporate world, getting a job at Coca-Cola. Talk us through that sort of decision of like pivoting away from professional sport and what made you go down the route of walking through the doors of Coca-Cola to land your first job with no university degree.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you think about your career story and you've got a bit of space and time to zoom out, maybe not quite to an alien perspective, but to look at the different eras or the different phases. It can make sense and tie together. And for me it does, but at the time it wasn't really that thought out or intentional. And so I did the cycling for a period of time, and one of the things that happens with sport as well is you get a lot of external validation. You're a bit of a hero, and there's a bit of this kind of hero identity that goes with it. And when I stopped in my early 20s, it felt like a big crash, like a big fall from grace. And I actually ended up having a period of my life there where things went pretty wobbly for me, and I lost my way, ended up in quite an abusive relationship, ended up battling with addictive behaviours and needing support and intervention from my amazing family. And that all happened in a very condensed period. But, when I look back, I think it was almost inevitable, right? I'd never really done the normal growing up from 16 to 20 that happens, and hadn't really thought through, like, who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And kind of was confronted with that in a very chaotic way. And so then when I ended up getting the job at Coca-Cola, my first proper job, like you said, I had no degree, and I had done well at school, and but I didn't have time to go and start a degree at that point. I was sort of panicking, right? Because I was like, oh gosh, I'm late. And I bluffed my way into that job. It was kind of like take the opportunity in front of you, and felt like I was fighting for my life a little bit, which sounds ridiculous now when I look back. And so if you go back to that, like thinking about the phases, sort of the cycling phase, lost my way, bluffed my way into this first corporate job, and then I probably applied an athlete's mentality to it, right? Which is where if you want to win, you just have to train harder and be really focused and visualize. And that came really naturally to me because I was in, I knew how to do race mode. I knew how to work hard. I just didn't know that what I'd done when I was racing was applicable. And so I outworked everyone. And I honestly, people talk about imposter syndrome, where you find yourself in a job and you're like, what am I doing? They're going to find me out. Like, what am I doing here? I have no idea what I'm doing. But I didn't have imposter syndrome. Like, I was an imposter. But I was like going home and like Googling stuff that people had talked about in the office because I just had no idea what they were talking about. I just kind of bluffing it. And this kind of went on. And but then I sort of slowly started to learn. And I ended up at Coke for, I can't remember how long it was. It was Coca-Cola Amatil then. It's changed now. But at least 5 years, I think. And by the end of it, I was running a multi-million-dollar business for Coke and leading a big national team of people, running a distribution and production facility. And I was like 25 maybe. And And I was probably still bluffing, but not quite as much. But I'd never had that thing that you just talked about, or like, what made you make the decision that that's what you wanted to do? I'd kind of like got in there. I was like, this is how I get out of the hole that I'm in. I'm going to like really fight for my life. And I loved it. Had a couple of really great leaders who kind of lifted me up, some not so good ones who really demonstrated how I didn't want to be. And at some point in there, I was like, I really like leading people. Like that kind of clicked, and I'm really good at it. And so that kind of set me off on the corporate trajectory, or the corporate ladder, as you've so lovingly described it.
The corporate ladder.
Yeah,
that's super interesting. And do you think your grit, because it sounds like what you're describing is like your work ethic, your grit, your drive, do you think that was cemented in you through your cycling days?
Yes.
Yeah,
I do, and but grit is I think, you know, if you think of the research around grit, it's that ability to continue working at something over and over again, and it's often mistaken as like being able to just dig deep for a race, right? Like that's not quite the same in the short term as it is that sort of long term resilience or grit. And so, yes, you know, sport, and especially endurance cycling, is a beautiful conditioning environment for grit. But it also comes through challenge, and you know, I'm hoping we're going to talk about outward bound and adversity and challenge, and the importance of that in developing grit and resilience. But for me, I had that wonderful experience with cycling, which, you know, has all of that kind of challenge, adversity, training your mind. And then I had a very, very tough period, which I can't believe I'm saying this, but I just wouldn't take it back now. You know, I think it's really interesting when you think of, like, you wouldn't wish it on yourself, you wouldn't wish it on your future or past self, or you wouldn't wish it on your child or your friend. But would you take it away now that you've had it and you've had all the learnings? Like, I just a million times no. So combo.
Yeah, and it's a funny dynamic, because like the most interesting people that I've met in my life are those that have probably suffered some of the most challenging shit and come from the most complex and like tough backgrounds as well. You know, they've lived a life, but even when it comes to like parenting, it's like I look at my daughter and I'm like, I want you to have a great adolescent, you know, and like and childhood. I don't want you to suffer and to experience these so-called challenges. So it's that funny dynamic, eh? It's like, you know, tough times make good people, but you kind of don't wish that on people at the same time. Yeah,
and maybe I'm a bad parent because I do want my children to have tough times and to suffer.
Maybe I'm a helicopter parent, eh?
But it is you're like, if you think of like one of the things I'm trying to do with my we're going to go into parenting, right, with my daughter who's 4, is if she falls over and it looks like it hurts,
don't react.
Yeah, right. So your instant reaction when your baby falls, like a hard fall, like smack. Like, can you remember the last time you fell over and really smacked yourself?
Smash your head, yeah.
It's like you think, and your instant like reaction is to rush and react. But what you're doing is you're actually reacting to the event, and you're like reacting and experiencing the event for her, rather than if she reacts. Responding to her emotions and like being there to help her, you know, process the event. And it's this massive override in your system to not do it. And so often, if you don't react, she'll kind of get up and dust her knee off and just walk off. And you're like, oh my God.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think you do apply that, right? Because you want them to be happy and you don't want them to suffer. But actually, it's really rewarding, even on like those little micro examples. I don't know how it's going to go when she's 16.
Yeah, it is a funny parenting hack, eh? Because, you know, a kid falls, they look over for the reaction, and you don't give them the reaction. They're like, oh, cool, I'm sweet, I'm fine.
I guess it's okay.
Carry on.
Then.
Just smash my head through like a glass. No, it's not that bad. And just want to pick up what you said earlier around, you know, post your cycling career, as you were like entering bluffing your way, as you say, through corporate world. You said that you went through like a period of, you know, quite tough times with falling into, you know, like sort of addictive behavior, and sort of sloping down a bit of a downward trajectory. What were some of those like warning signs where you realized, you know, like in yourself that those were some bad behaviors that you were displaying? Was there any like moments that sort of came by? Like, how did you acknowledge you going through a shit time in your life?
Do you know what? I think at the time it would have been incredibly difficult for me to articulate that. We've got over a decade of air between that now, and you can look back kindly on yourself. But when you're in a state of self-loathing and kind of helpless and lost, I probably wouldn't have even had the emotional intelligence to articulate how am I? Like if you'd met me and said like, how are you? You would have got the response I would have expected you to want from me rather than like me even knowing how to answer that to myself, let alone you. And I think one of the things you just mentioned before was around some people who have resilience and grit have really tough backgrounds and underprivileged backgrounds. And I want to really acknowledge that's not me, right? Like I had actually a lot of privilege, and that's been a big driver of my shift later, which it is kind of what am I going to do with all of that privilege, right? Like that recognition of you've got to do something with it, you can't escape it. But so I guess what happened is that I had the support networks around me to knock me back in line, which not everyone does when shit goes wrong. And I think the interesting thing about abusive relationships or relationships where you get trapped, especially for women often, is that you can kind of, by the time you're in that situation, it's too late. Like by the time you realize, it's way too late. And that was definitely what happened for me. I was like, kind of by the time it was like very obvious that I was just so out of my depth, it was way too late. And so yeah, my family and some friends were amazing, but it was probably a years long process. Like there was the immediate like move out of the flat on K Road and get back to the farm with my parents, move, and then there was the longer term work that had to happen around healing. And humor is an amazing coping mechanism, and with the gift of 10 years of clear air between me and the situation, and you start to have warning signs that things were going wrong. Like I walked into a barbershop and shaved half my head off and the hair off, and then went and got a tattoo on the side of my head, right? Like, like I was
Really?
like, really?
Did you do a Britney Spears?
I did. It was before Britney Spears. Noah, Britney
OG
Spears.
Britney.
Britney Spears did a Malindi MacLean. But yeah, I really did. It was like such a dramatic, like, I'm going to get a tattoo on the side of my head and then just see if anyone stops me kind of move.
Wow.
I know. Oh my God, my team are going to hear this and like demand to see it.
I reckon there's like 2 truths, 1 lie. Like that's got to be, it's got to be in there. What's the tattoo?
Yeah,
I'm asking.
one day I will show you, but
Okay.
I'm not telling you, especially not in this public setting. It is so embarrassing.
Tried to get out of you. That's super interesting. And thanks for your vulnerability as well. I think, it's easier in hindsight to like reflect back on those tough times, but I think it's also important to acknowledge those things happened, and it also shapes who you are today. So, when it comes to, I guess like being a strong, sort of like fierce woman in a corporate setting, especially in probably the early 2000s, I know you had some pretty like prickly situations that happened. Can you just speak on a little bit around, what was the perception of like a young 25-year-old woman in a corporate, probably male-dominated environment?
Do you want the gory details?
I want the deets.
Yeah. I mean, when I look back now, I'm like horrified at some of the stuff that happened. And I think I said this to you sort of at the time. I actually had a ball in my 20s when I was working, and I loved it. And there was behaviours and things that would happen that I kind of just thought was par for the course, right? And when I think about it now, I just think I just couldn't imagine that happening in my workplace, like even remotely. An example would be, I had this one situation where I was pretty young, and I'd just been promoted into a senior role for one of the first senior roles, and been at this work event, and shared a taxi with one of the senior managers up to, like, after the work event, I was going up to meet some friends, and he was married with kids, and I just didn't even cross my mind that I was in an unsafe situation. And, I was I was kind of feeling accepted, right? Because I was this young, sort of new leader. And he threw himself on me in the taxi, and I remember it so vividly because my head like kind of went back and hit the side of the taxi, and he was like trying to make out with me in the taxi.
No forewarning, just
nothing. And I his huge guy hauled him off me. Taxi driver pulled over and was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "No, I'm just going to get out." And I went in to meet my friend at the bar. Got out. This is Friday night, and sat there and had 3 margaritas and just ranted about it to my friend. And she was like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I was like, "Well, I guess he's pretty senior and he's probably going to be mortified. So, when he apologizes on Monday, I'll just probably say it's okay." Anyway, I get in on Monday and he ignored me. And then my boss pulled me into an office and was like, "I've just been told that I need to rein you in and that your behavior on Friday night was unacceptable." So you think, oh, okay. Your brain's going like tick, 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 tick. Anyway, long story short, it all actually worked out. And I was like, oh, okay, I think I need to go in for a fight here. I'm not going to just say, sweet, that's fine. So I went in and the organization was amazing and they handled it amazingly. And actually was one of the things that probably set me up really well was to see that's not okay. And that, here, this is what advocacy looks like. And I was actually fine. I wasn't too badly affected. It was only because I thought I was going to get in trouble that I went into this. But when I think back, it's like if he just turned up and said, "I'm really sorry, I'm really embarrassed," I would have said fine. And how many other women would have that happened to, or worse situations. And so, things like that, when I look back, I just think absolutely mad. And it wasn't that long ago. I know it. It's I'm sure it still happens
100%.
all the time.
Yeah.
And those power dynamics. And so all that stuff that you hear about, having those experiences, again, pretty useful. And it makes you, I think, leading an organization now where you have lots of young staff, lots of people where it is their first time job as well. They are looking to their leaders and to other people who have been working for longer to understand what's normal, what's accepted, what's not. So, those lessons are really important.
That is crazy. What a dog. Just want to
What a dog, right?
You're a dick.
I hope you're listening and you know who you are.
We'll find them on LinkedIn or something. That's wild. And it's just, that story has probably happened so many times and probably still does happen. And you can understand when there's different power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
Especially because he's probably done this before. He knows how to play the game and,
It all came out and he had, right? But the context for me was I just kind of come out of this phase. I was fighting for my life. I needed that job and I needed to not make a drama and not be difficult. So there is all of that at play. And you zoom out and you look back and you're like, oh man, that is crazy. But at the time, I was just like, I just want to get through this and get on with my job. So,
did you have any experiences where particularly senior, maybe male executives were very intimidated by you and didn't maybe want to see you progress through the organization?
I actually, I couldn't say. I think, I'm sure, and I'm sure. And I think as I've gotten older, I've also learned that you adapt your style to be less assertive in some ways, so more approachable or more self-deprecating. And I've definitely honed this kind of self-deprecation.
It's very Kiwi, eh?
It's very Kiwi, and it's also it's sort of disarming, if you like. And I've something that's happened self-consciously, and as I've gotten older, I've been given feedback around it, which has been useful to kind of go, well, why am I doing that? So probably more subtle, but I've had also the most incredible male role models and leaders and supporters who have absolutely elevated me and been incredible supporters as well. So both.
Yeah. No, that's good to hear. It hasn't just been a totally shit experience climbing the
no,
corporate
not
ladder.
at all, not at all. But it's also good to talk about those things, right?
For sure.
You don't want to focus on them too much.
Yeah.
But it's such a universal experience as well.
Yeah.
It's good to talk about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And keen to move into your work at Outward Bound. And we just had Jacob on the podcast, who's a mate of mine, and he also went through Outward Bound a few years ago, and that was like his catalyst moment for starting his business today, which is awesome.
He's a barbershop. Hey?
Yeah, Self-Made Studio, shout out.
Yeah.
And I think I went to Outward Bound when I was in year 13, and that completely changed my life.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I see it as like a rite of passage. I keep telling my daughter, I'm like, when you're 18, I'm sending you to Outward Bound. And I think she thinks it's a less cool idea because I mentioned it, which is a bit annoying. So I might need your help sort of encouraging her to do it. But yeah, I mean, it's just such a pivotal moment in my life. It really helped me, I guess, like connect with nature, connect with individuals that I usually wouldn't spend 21 days with. And I think a massive part of it is also like the time spent away from your device. Like, I remember probably to this day, there'll probably be the only 21-day consecutive time in my entire lifetime where I'm probably going to be away from a computer, a cell phone, Instagram, Outlook, you name it. And I'm just real grateful for that, like, especially as a teenager where that's your life lives on social media. So, like, do you see Outward Bound, like, where do you see the potential of Outward Bound for young people?
Well, I believe that Outward Bound actually has the capacity to change the world, and in particular, change a young person's world. So someone who comes in our course, it is transformative, as you know, and I'll take full credit for the fact that you've started this podcast and you're amazing, and you got to sit across and have a conversation with Patty Gower. We'll claim it all because of Outward Bound. And so what do I see as the role of Outward Bound? I think what's really interesting is, so we're an organisation that has been around in New Zealand for over 60 years, so over half a century, and even longer internationally. So it started in Wales in the 40s, sort of a post-war solution, and founded on this idea of like trying to build life skills, put the kind of pressure cooker of life skills and build resilience and confidence. And it's always been a screen-free environment, right? So before screens were a thing, but that has become this bigger and bigger part of what it is for. And so over that 60 years in New Zealand, it's worked with young people on this transition from youth to adulthood. As you're turning up, like I was saying, how I was like, I don't know who I want to be. Who am I? What am I going to show up as an adult? That question is a question that young people have to ask themselves and answer, no matter where they come from, no matter what language they speak. Actually, no matter what point in history they've existed, that's this kind of universal human truth, is that at some point we transition into adulthood, and it's really crucial. And it's crucial for your well-being, and it's crucial for how you contribute to society. And Outward Bound is just this like ability to capture this magic crucial moment, whether it's at 16, 17, 18, or kind of up to 30, if you think about brain development and where that brain is going through that phase, and taking a young person into this sort of like a circuit break, into this environment where they get challenge and adversity without trauma. So the supportive environment to push your barriers, to push your boundaries, and kind of just like feel the edges of your resilience in a way that it's really hard to do in our modern life. To connect with people from all walks of life, and so you don't get to choose, like you said, like you've got this group of people, your cohort on your course, and you have to learn to work with them, you have to learn to cooperate with them and sleep with them, and all of those amazing things that just help you learn about yourself and others. And then there's now this added benefit of getting off your device and getting away from this very, very addictive technology that is massively interfering with young people's development. So this is kind of like this bonus that we offer now. We haven't changed what we do, but the context has changed, and it's really transformative. And so we don't serve anywhere near enough students. And if we had, if people really understood what we did, I think there's no parent in New Zealand who wouldn't pay for their child to come, or their teenager, or their 25-year-old to come on one of our courses, because it is one of those amazingly transformative things that you could do if you really understood it. Like, absolutely, you would pay if you could afford it. And donors, who support our scholarship students, we need more support to reach more students, because we just are not reaching enough. But yes, it has the capacity to change the world.
Completely agree. It's I think there's like a space for like controlled resilience, and I feel like that's so fundamental for young people. Like having actually like a controlled space where you can be tested, both like mentally and physically. And it's not like, if people are listening, they're like, it sounds like a bloody boot camp. Like it's not like that whatsoever. But yeah, like where do you see the role in like controlled resilience in the development for young people?
Well, I guess if you think of like trying to learn about resilience, or like trying to learn to have resilience, which is the sort of the ability to overcome adversity or bounce back from setbacks, without challenge or adversity, is like trying to swim without water, right? Like trying to learn to swim in a pool without water. Like you just can't. You might practice the motions, but you're not going to learn how to swim. And so if you think you're going to have an adversity or challenge-free life, fine. But most people aren't. And so, life is supposed to be, if you think about how our brains work, we're actually designed to be in this world where you have to work quite hard for pleasure. And you're supposed to kind of put in some effort to get pleasure, and I'm going into type 2 fun territory here around like the reward of having to work for something and work for pleasure is really good for you. It's really good for your brain. It's really good for your reward pathways, sort of how your body responds to dopamine. And yet we're in this kind of abundance of pleasure, and we've sort of removed discomfort and adversity in all areas of our life. Like we want things to be seamless and easy, and all of our design that we put into products and technology is about like seamless comfort, kind of easy access, right? And it's lovely, but it's not that good for you if that's your whole world and you don't actually ever, feel bored or challenged, or, the kind of the ups and downs, the spice of life. And so the role of Outward Bound and other organisations like Outward Bound, there's not many, but, Spirit of Adventure does a great job of what it's sort of similar to what we do. The role of these kind of safe, supportive environments where you can challenge yourself to the edge of what's challenging for you is going to become more and more scarce, I think, and more and more precious. It already is super, super precious, but real human experiences are, we have to protect them, especially for our young people. And one thing that I'll say that's really interesting, I often use this analogy of like, with Outward Bound, what you get as an outcome might be different. Like me and you, we might go on the same course together. So, Malindi comes from a really privileged background and has kind of had everything handed to me on a plate. That's my story. And I'm 18 and I come into this program, and my parents have paid for me. And Noah, you've come from a really rough background. You've got no confidence. You kind of actually don't have much outlook. And you've come in on a scholarship, and we meet on this course, and we go through the same program together in the same watch with the same instructors. We do the same thing every day. We sleep next to each other on the kata. And through this process, you actually kind of go, oh, man, like I actually have like aspirations and ambition and confidence, and you come out of Outward Bound feeling like more resilient, but also like I've got this ability to believe in myself and what I could do, right? Where you were feeling pretty defeatist going in. So that's what you needed to get out of it. And I get something completely different. Like I've learned like empathy, and I've probably humbled myself a little bit, and actually gone, well, actually I've really enjoyed the service aspect of this, and like giving back to my community and really relating to people who are different from me. I've never really been around people who are different to me. And so we go through this exact same program and get the thing that we needed out of it, and it's completely different. And so that's what's really magic about Outward Bound, is it's like transformative for you for what you need. And part of it is like unlocking, how do you unlock your own potential and what makes you ready for the next phase of your life, and that's really different for each person.
It's so true. And just reflecting on my watch, Hillary 616, shout out, best watch to ever exist. And it was that. It was like a melting pot of different young people. You know, we had people who had, you know, their parents obviously paid for it, like what you said. We had people that were on a scholarship, and the connections you make. But more so for me, it was like, some of those people I met on my watch through Outward Bound, like we're still best mates, and I've got connections all around the world now. So like when I'm going to Europe later this year, I've got people I can stay over in England, which is awesome. And I just felt like coming back home just had so much more like drive and energy, and it was kind of like you were operating. It felt like I was on this different wavelength to everyone else. I was like, why aren't you guys like rearing and energized and like ready to go? And I remember that was a massive pivotal shift for me as like as like a new dad at the age of, you know, my daughter was probably like a year and a half by the time I went in there, and being shit scared about like what my future looked like as a teen parent. And Outward Bound was so pivotal in like changing that story and that narrative in my head to be something like positive that I should be proud of. So I'll always be like in debt to Outward Bound for that. So so hopefully it's a good sales pitch.
Oh, it's amazing. And it never gets old hearing these stories. I think that's the most amazing thing about my job, which I'm just so grateful for, is everywhere you go, you meet people who have an Outward Bound adjacent story, whether they did it or their uncle or auntie did it or someone they met at school. And the universal piece of, you know, that follows is it changed my life or it changed their life. And it never gets old. You know, like I often cry when people tell me these stories. I was at a wedding last month, and a guy was like, oh my God, you work for Outward Bound, and he just ran off, and I was like, oh, maybe he had a bad experience. And he runs back with his wife, and he's like, we met on Outward Bound, like we were in the same watch. It's so cool. Like it really is a privilege to serve the organisation.
Do you reckon you got like one of the best jobs in the world?
I think I have the best job in the world. I really do. And you know that someone said something recently that it really resonated. It's like it's hard to string more than 1 or 2 negative days together. Like you can't really be negative when you are surrounded by an organisation full of people, you know, often like pretty young, pretty talented, who are out there trying to change the world. Like you just can't, like, what an amazing thing I get to do every day.
Yeah.
And my team is so incredible. It is amazing.
We'll give a shout out to Krish as well. Krish works at Outward Bound, and I think he screened me on the phone when I first went there, and we've been like mates ever since.
Well, Krish introduced us.
He would have. Yeah, would have too. Back in the MTFJ days.
Yes.
When you were a new mother speaking to lots of mayors across the country.
Yes.
I'm keen to like touch into maybe like what are some of the ugly parts of like running a charity in New Zealand, especially because you've gone from, you know, like a for-profit sector into the not-for-profit sector. But I think something which you said, I think last year, was that there's actually no such thing as a charity. I think that's quite an interesting mindset around, you know, you've still got to get funding, you got to be sustainable, and you got to sort of have that mindset as a business. But as a CEO of one of New Zealand's most like prestigious charities, like what are some of the ugly parts that people probably don't see on the surface?
I think I see that there's no such thing as a not-for-profit, and I think that's related to the fact that it doesn't matter that you are measuring success with impact and outcomes and thinking about these students whose lives you've changed. You can't monetize people's well-being or put a figure on that. But you still have to be viable, and in some ways you still need profit and a surplus and revenue to be able to operate. And in some ways you have to be more commercially astute, or you have to be more commercially astute because you have less money, and the money that you do have is donors' money, and so you are duty bound to put it to maximum impact. And that was one of the first things that I came in, you know, with this idea is like we have to get this organisation future-proofed for the next, like it has to be around for the next 60 years. It's been here for 60 years and it has to stay. And so we have to set it up to be sustainable for the next half century. So that is a work in progress at the moment. So the ugly parts, I think, when you are a CEO or a leader of any organization, big or small, you have to make tough choices. And sometimes that involves making a decision that puts an organization or the students of tomorrow or the future ahead of a person that's standing in front of you right now and what their beliefs and their needs might be right now. And that's an incredibly challenging thing to do in any organization when you're making decisions that affect people. But it's even more hard when the people that work in the organization like drink the Kool-Aid. They are there because they're not there to get rich, right? Like they are there because they believe so deeply about what, like I do, about what we're doing. And so being in a team of very beliefs-based people who are there for the mission makes it really hard to optimize for that kind of financial sustainability in the same way. And so that's a balancing act because you need people with that heart and you need people that are willing to work 100% in a charity. So I think that has been really challenging. And through COVID, I sort of promised myself I'm going to stop talking about COVID, but it was so hard to lead through COVID, especially running an organization like Outward Bound, and you just couldn't get it right. You just, everywhere you stepped, you were standing on a mine, it was just boom, boom, boom everywhere and thankless. And so I think some of that, it makes you better and it makes you learn and makes you really self-aware, but it's really hard. And some of the decision making through COVID, I lost a lot of sleep over what the right thing to do was for students, staff, community, etc.
Anything in particular?
Yeah, I think the vaccine mandates were
tough,
really hard. And I really tried to hold a position of non-judgment and hold my views lightly. And people were very emotionally intense right across the spectrum of beliefs on that. And you're rolling out a government mandate. You've got staff that live and work on site. And I made calls that I lost sleep over. I think you sometimes you get them right, sometimes you get them wrong, and that's part of it. So yeah.
Do you feel like you put like a lot of pressure on yourself, Malindi, like as a CEO of an organization, and like how do you juggle with the pressure and the expectations that you put on yourself?
I love pressure, but no, I do, and I have this mantra which is going to make you think that I'm a crazy person, but it's an acronym, and it's ALIND. And it's like when things get ALIND, right? And so like when things do get really, really intense and I'm like in what I call the valley of despair, where it's like it's so hard and I don't know what to do. And like no one's going to thank me for whatever I do. I just think, at least I'm not dead. Ellen,
nice.
Ellen, like it's just, at least I'm not dead, and so I think that's just that like a little bit of just sometimes you got to think you just got to do your best, and so yes I do, but I have pretty good perspective.
I'm gonna start using that one now. I like that
because then you can also like say Ellen, but instead of the I it can be a Y, so it's like at least you're not dead. So you can, it can be like something you, you're nodding at me like, oh, you are actually quite.
I like that, Alan. I'm definitely going to use that next time. I'm just stressing the fuck out.
I think it was interesting. I listened to your wonderful podcast with Paddy the other day, and I liked him talking about the 99th percentile.
Yeah, 99th percentile.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is available to me is that same thing of like getting into the zone and getting into flow state.
Yeah.
And it absolutely comes from professional sport, like that ability to go.
Switch on.
I know how to turn on, and then equally, like you finish a race, you're in recovery, you know how to turn off as well. And so being able to switch on and off really quickly means, you can have your weekend. If you have to turn on for something that's urgent, that's cropped up, sweet, turn on, focus, get what you need to get done, and straight back into your weekend. And that's a real power powerful tool to be able to keep the balance right.
Yeah. So many similarities with what Paddy was saying around 99th percentile. It's cool because I think you look at someone like Paddy Gower and you think, oh, he's sort of made his way into his career. You know, he's got the voice, he's got the looks, he's got the charisma.
Like me.
Exactly like you.
That's what you were about to say.
But you can tell that he's just like, he's an outlier and he's got there through so much fucking hard work and dedication.
He's got a bit of mongrel, eh? Like you've got to love a little bit of that, like a little bit of mongrel. And I think that's something that you know, people admire in others, even though you don't really want to be a mongrel yourself. Like it's something that you're like, oh no, I don't want to be that. Like, but he's got that, and people really admire it in other people. Yeah,
100%. When it comes to like looking after your own mental health as well, Malindi, like how do you sort of juggle your own mental health? You know, leading a massive organization with a family as well. What does that look like for you?
Well, it's the same way I look after my physical health in the sense that it's disciplined and by design and intentional, and sometimes you slip off the tracks, right? So you try to have a good diet and exercise and be generally healthy, you know, not smoke, not drink, and all of those good things that, you know, are good for your physical health. And the same with mental health. Like, you know, most of us know the things that make us feel better and help us ride the ups and downs. And so for me, you know, the stuff that works and that I've learned works, I try to hold on to and be really disciplined about. I think also I know what it's like to feel like you can't, like you're at the bottom and you can't get out. And so I just never ever want to get back in that space. And so for me, it's different to other people, but I have to run. You know, I have to get outside. Like I'm allergic to exercising inside. Like I think, you know, if you ever find me on a treadmill, like do an intervention, Noah, something is wrong. So I have to get outside. And if I go too many days in a row without getting outside, even if it's for a walk or a run, you know, I'm going to be pretty blue. Yeah.
Is it like a weekly, like a daily thing for you? Like
if it can be. Yeah. I mean, I've had 2 babies. I've had so in the last 4 years, I've had 2 babies and breastfeeding and recovery. So it's maybe not been as disciplined as, but you do a lot of running around after your kids. But it is. Sure. You know, that works for me. I'm an extreme extrovert, and I'm like a leech around other people. You know, I just want to latch on and feed off their energy. Yeah. And so again, I like having a little bit of alone time, but I need to be around people, and interesting people are really good for me. And so it's like things like that you learn about yourself. I think probably in the last like 5 years, you know, I'd be, for the first time in my life, I could actually write down like, these are the top 5 things that are good for me and for my mental health. And these are the top 5 things that are good for my physical health. And if I just focus on the top 1 or 2, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. And I couldn't have done that like 8 or 9 years ago. And so it's a really cool thing for anyone to do, is to like really think about like, what do I know is going to work for me? Like, what are the 1 or 2 things that are going to, if I just do those, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. And it's because when you introspectively actually think about it, like there's so many triggers for my own like mental and physical well-being. Like for me, keeping hydrated is like so important. Yeah. Time with family, definitely like exercise. Like if I've been bad this past like 4 days. I haven't done anything, and I've got like itchy teeth right now. Yeah. So yeah, that's
itchy
huge.
Teeth.
Itchy teeth. Like you just want to get like, out there. You know what I mean?
Like itchy feet or itchy teeth?
Itchy, probably a bit of both.
Okay, you go for a run and brush your teeth, and you know, there you go.
just you know, when your body just needs to move.
Yeah, totally. And then something random will break you, right? So for me, it's like you can cope with everything that the world throws at you. Yeah. And then just this week, I booked in a candlelight yin yoga class at 8 p.m. And I was trying to get my daughter to bed and asleep in time to get there, and I like raced down to get to this yin yoga class, which is supposed to be like a relaxing thing, and I was 1 minute late and I was locked out, and I just snot cried, you know, like it was just like, it was just the thing that I just had no resilience for. And so it's funny how you'll be fine and then things will catch you and you're like, interesting, like I just missed a yoga class and I've cried over it, but I've done all these other things that are so much harder. Yeah. And so if you can laugh at yourself for that and just kind of ride the wave, I think that helps.
There's a ruthless yoga class that locks you out after 60 seconds.
Yeah,
Man.
I know.
Should be, open
It's very
door policy.
anti-yogi, right?
Yeah, very anti the mantra. I think that, conversation on mental health also segues nicely into this conversation around social media addiction.
Yeah.
Particularly for, and I don't even want to say just for like young people, because it is everyone. Like you go on the train, you go anywhere in public and everyone is glued to their phone. So I think that perception that it's just teenagers is just simply not true. I saw that you did some research at Outward Bound post-course for students. And was it that 80% of young people, like after having a period of not being on their phone, wanted to actually decrease their screen time? So yeah, I'm just keen to touch base and hear from you, your perspective on social media addiction in New Zealand.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said about young people and adults, or kids and adults, being equally addicted is very true. And when you think about how addiction works and how the technology is designed, it's not a surprise, right? It's designed to be addictive and very effective at that. I think the difference is that young people's brains are developing and wiring up for the way they're going to be for the rest of their lives, and adults aren't. And they, our brains are still plastic and can change, but it's not going through that same developmental pathway. And so what we were talking about before around that kind of, that phase of like wiring up your brain, your habits, your identity, how you respond to reward, and even think, your dopamine cycles. You're at such an intensely important stage, especially under 18, under 16 in particular. But, our brains continue to develop up until we're 30, and sometimes I think it's slightly later for men.
I think,
Never?
I think my apparently, is that 25 for frontal cortex for men?
Yeah, it's a little later actually on average, I think. I think there's
I've still got an excuse. That's good.
Yeah. And so I think when I think about social media addiction for young people, there's a couple of different ways of looking at this. Like, there is a responsibility to young people who are under 16, who are kids, to protect them from harm, in the same way that we do not accept that under 16-year-olds should have cigarettes or alcohol or heroin. And the evidence around harm is so overwhelming. It's astounding to me that this isn't something we've dealt with. And so, I am part of a group that is launching next month called Before 16. And we will be working really, really hard to get some changes in this space from a legislative point of view to support parents and young people. But even over 16, 16, 17, 18, or, young people in general, they're spending 6 to 8 hours a day on their devices, and often at very young ages being exposed to rape content, extreme pornographic content. They're being approached by various predators or groomers. And they're seeing things like animal abuse and bestiality and hardcore gore. And because they're seeing it young, and it's sort of like addictive, it's, they need to see more and more intense and more extreme content to keep it getting that kind of rush that they get. So it's just designed as this like very, very harmful thing. And I think we just have to ask ourselves, is that okay? It just doesn't feel that complicated to me. So adults are, we are independent and free and can make choices. And I would argue that we should probably all be thinking about our device use. But young people, we have a duty to be more responsible. Yeah.
And I saw that documentary, The Social Dilemma. Don't know if you've seen that on Netflix. Great. And it's got all like the big tech giants and the people who created like the like button on Facebook and Gmail notifications. And at the end, they asked them, are your kids on social media? And all of them were like, hell no.
Yeah.
I'm not getting them on that thing.
Yeah.
And it does seem like, maybe with your work with Before 16 and probably more parents probably waking up, and just people in general, like I'm pretty sick of my social media addiction. I'll definitely admit I've got one. Like you can imagine a world in like, I don't know, 20 or 30 years from now that people look back at this time as like the Wild West.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're like, why the hell did we not move faster on this sort of stuff?
I hope so. I really hope
too.
so. Yeah, and I think, I think about when I was a kid, and I'm a millennial, so we are the last generation who grew up without smartphones and sort of digital technology kind of integrated into our lives. And God, like if I wanted to get access porn, you have to go into the R18 section of a dairy or the video stores, right? Like it's not that easy to do.
There's some barriers in place.
There's
a bit of public humiliation involved.
There's some shame, and there's the kind of social regulation and responsibility of the dairy owner, and like kids still got it, right?
Yeah.
And it was still, you're nodding, like it was still, but it wasn't this just like socially acceptable thing that it was available in your bedroom whenever you wanted it on your phone when you're 12, and that is what we're dealing with, and it and so the research we did was really interesting. So it wasn't just yes, young people coming off Outward Bound wanted to reduce their screen time. That also translated into actual behaviour change. So once they had that break and experienced what it was like, not just to not be online all the time, but to be around people who are not online all the time, they translated that into an actual reduction of screen time. So we asked about that too. But that really interesting thing is that they supported legislation to restrict access to social media for under 16s, having experienced what it was like to have an enforced shutdown. So the context of that is really unique, right? Where, because you'd say, well, why don't you just not have social media? But if all of your friends have social media, it's a really isolating thing to do, to come off it.
Yep.
But if it's enforced, like they want to get off it, but they kind of want someone else to enforce it for us. So then it's not I'm not just left out. Like I can actually get back to being a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old. And so that was really compelling information that we uncovered.
What do you think is like the key legislative change policymakers could make around reducing screen time for under 16s?
There are two things, and the most important is an age limit on social media to 16. And
why 16?
I think there are, like, I would say 18, but there are, you can get a job at 16. You can be a parent at 16. And you've done a bunch of, but under 16, you are very much a child, right? And there is some synergies with, there's a movement to allow voting at 16, whatever you think about that. So it sort of feels like a very natural place. And once a young person might leave school and go and get a job, it's a really hard thing to kind of, say you can still not drink and things like that. So, but 18 would probably be, if you were looking at the science, 18 would be better. It's just not very realistic. So restricting it to 16. And actually what the government need to do is they need to legislate and then put the onus onto technology companies to come up with the solutions around age verification technology, rather than put the onus on parents to do this or young people to self-regulate because it's an addiction. So that's step one. And then the second thing would be child-approved devices. So there is technology available, and if you are a parent of a teenager who is under 18 or under 16, I would say go and buy them a Smart Surfer phone. It's a phone that looks like an iPhone, and you can still get all the things that parents argue that their kids need, like bus apps or GPS. But it has you can't get on unlimited access to the internet. It has built-in nudity blockers and porn filters and built into the phone, and it's been developed by Safe Surfer and Samsung, and it's like a couple $100. So that is amazing. And so if you had a legislation that said, actually, you can only give a child-approved device, then guess what companies will do? They will develop child-approved devices, and that will become an easy thing to do, like a child-approved laptop or a child-approved iPad or a child-approved smartphone that has all the things they need but not the things they don't. We just need our legislators to make that change. But social media is the one that needs to happen first and fast.
Yeah, it's pretty wild out there. And I know I do think of my daughter, because we were like the guinea pigs of the social media age. Like particularly, I was born in 1998, and like we were there on the rise of social media.
All your mistakes.
All my mistakes are on there. Like it's horrible, and it was so new that I think we got under the rug because a lot of parents also didn't understand it. They're like, what the hell's Instagram?
Totally.
Like, what's Tumblr?
Yeah.
Like, what's Snapchat? Because they were still really freshly launched companies
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do see there being massive potential for that. And it's like also the self-image for like young men and girls
Totally.
looking at like a life which is unachievable through
Absolutely.
Instagram, and people look perfect and they're always happy.
Yeah.
It's I've also got to check myself on that.
Well,
constantly.
check yourself, because you obviously know the problem. So maybe you need a refresher outward bound course, Noah, to kind of get yourself some discipline.
I won't say no.
The interesting thing about your generation and kind of being in that wild west of like the first getting social media. I think I was like maybe 20 the first time I heard about Facebook. I don't have any social media. And I have LinkedIn, but I don't have any social media and haven't. But our kids, what I'm really like fascinated by is I take my daughter swimming, and I sit on the side and I watch her do this 30-minute class. And if you look around the pool, there is not one parent who is not bent over their iPhone, right? And there's all these little kids having these learning moments. And I just do not do it. I will not. I watch her. And like sometimes I want to, right? I'm like something going on at work. And I'm like, shit, I don't want to be watching this doggy paddle. I need to look at my phone, but I just won't. And I watch her. And she looks up at me like in a 30-minute class, like at least 15 times. I sometimes get a thumbs up or a smile. She sees me watching her. But you just think like, what must they think of us? Like these adults that are walking around like, so their brains are just imprinting how the world works. And so it's not even like whether you let them have a device or like, what are you demonstrating? What are we demonstrating in terms of our relationship with these weird little rectangles?
It's crazy. Yeah. It's so true. And there's been like, I'm thinking about my daughter's swimming. I remember there was like one time I would have been on my phone, and I remember like after the class, like my daughter was like, Dad, you didn't see me do that like freestyle stroke. Like I looked up to you on your phone. I was like, fuck.
I know. And it's great that she said that.
Yeah. She's good and vocal about those things. She'll call me out on my shit. Yeah. But no, it's so true. We're just absolutely zombies to these devices. So
And I think for parents, like I think the more we talk about it's okay to delay, and that it doesn't make you popular, and yes, you are the mean parent, but you will never regret delaying giving your kid a smartphone, especially if they are like 13, 14, so delay.
No, it's cool to hear your work with Before 16. So
watch this space.
Yeah, depending on what time this gets released, if you guys have officially launched, we'll chuck a link in the description.
Awesome.
Wherever you're finding this episode. Malindi, we'll finish up with some quick fire questions and a bit of a quote, but just want to say a massive thanks for jumping on the podcast. And I've really valued, my time at Outward Bound hugely. It's changed my life, and I hope this conversation can help reach some more ears of young people or parents, mostly young people, because that's who listens to the podcast, to get them to go on an Outward Bound course.
Absolutely.
Thank you for jumping on.
Thank you.
Cool. Malindi, what brings you true happiness?
Love.
What is the meaning of life?
Love.
Advice you wish you knew about when you were younger?
There are 4 types of fun. And type 1 fun is fun in the moment, like now when you're doing something, it's fun in the moment. Type 2 fun is not fun in the moment, it's fun later. Type 3 fun is not fun in the moment and not fun later. And type 4 fun is not fun in the moment. Not a fun in the moment, but not fun later, and you think of like a hangover. And I wish that someone had told me about type 2 fun, because it is sort of probably what I live for now, is things like cold swims and going running and hiking and all those good things.
Love that. What does legacy mean to you?
I think legacy is a grandiose concept that can kind of lead people astray. But one of my favorite quotes is something that my dad used to say, and it's not his quote, and it's pretty famous, but it's that idea that the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago, and the second best time is now. And I think that's a really lovely thing, because you sometimes think you might just plant a tree for the person that might sit under it in 100 years, and you'll just never know them and they won't know you.
I like that. If you could change one thing in New Zealand, what would this be?
I just restrict social media to over 18-year-olds.
To over 18-year-olds.
Yeah, if I could change it, like if I had the power, Noah, I would. Yeah.
What do you believe is the main thing that is holding back young people in New Zealand?
I think it is their addiction to screens and social media. I really do. I think if you took that away, and there's so much opportunity for young people, and if you could get them off their devices, there's a whole world awaiting.
Love that. Thanks, Malindi.
Thank you.
Yeah, just again, a massive thanks. Love what you're doing at Outward Bound and just the passion and energy you bring every time I see you. So yeah, really appreciate your time on this podcast. Noah. We'll finish up with a quote. And this is an anonymous quote. We don't know who actually said it, but I thought it was really good. We'll end with this. There is more to be learned on one day of discomfort, poverty, and anxiety than in a lifetime of apparent happiness, security, riches, and power. Cheers, Malindi.
Kia ora.